Hi, I'm James McGuire, editor of Datamation, and our topic today is Business Rules Management Software, BRMS. We'll be talking about key trends and best practices in BRMS. To talk about that, we've got four experts. With us is Connie Moore, Senior VP of Research at Digital Clarity. Hello to you, Connie.
Hi.
And where are you located? Are you somewhere on the East Coast, right, Connie?
I'm near Washington, D.C.
Aha, okay. Also with us is Ankur Goyal, a Principal Product Manager for Progress Software. Hello to you, Ankur.
Hey, James.
And I know you are in Austin, correct?
Right.
Yes. Dana Gardner, Analyst at Interarbor Solutions, all-around IT smart person. Hello to you, Dana.
Hello, James. Good to be with you again.
And is it Massachusetts? Where are you at, Dana?
New Hampshire, actually. Very
New
close.
Hampshire, okay. One of those New England states. All right. And Mr. Ken Hess, System Administrator, author, well-known IT journalist. Hello to you, Ken.
Hey, thanks a lot, James.
And it looks like it's sunny there in Oklahoma today.
It is.
Based on your window.
I can move my head in front of it there so you can...
No, we like the sunshine, actually.
Yeah, it's one of the few sunny days we've had. We've had a lot of rain here, so we're glad.
More rain in California, actually, as a matter of fact. So, business rules management software. I guess I would ask the four of you. If you're going to advise this hypothetical company that's looking for a business rules software product, what sort of things would you advise them to look for? Given that there's a couple of constituencies, there's IT folks, there's business folks. What's important? Ankur, what's your take? And also, actually, if you give us a little nutshell, what actually does a BRMS solution do for a company? And then please talk about what you might think about when you're picking one out.
Sure, James. So business rules management systems are really expert systems designed to manage your rules and business logic. So instead of keeping your logic in the form of application code in any software system, you've now extracted that logic and put it into a system that's specifically designed for managing rules. So you're building and modeling and testing your rules in a separate expert system while keeping the software solutions just from an application standpoint where you're thinking about the user experience and different features and not have to worry about the logic in that code. So that's essentially what a rules management system is. And I think when companies are looking at BRMS systems and trying to figure out what are some of the things that we should be careful for, one of the things that we've seen customers do is just try to understand why they're looking at a BRMS system. There could be a variety of different reasons why they've gone down that path, and I think it's really critical for them to understand why they're doing so. One of them could be, for example, you're operating in an environment where the rules are constantly changing, right? So, for example, you're in a heavy compliance and regulatory environment, for example, financial services or the insurance sector, so much so that every time a regulation changes, you're just having difficulty keeping pace with the change that's happening. And so each change that happens from a regulation standpoint requires months of development effort. And now you're looking at a BRMS system where you don't have to take that much development time in making those changes. You're keeping up with that change, with those regulations and compliance, and making sure you can develop faster. That's sort of one area where you would look at. I think the other thing that companies would need to look at from a BRMS standpoint is, well, are you looking to go a BRMS route for making your business agile, right? Mm-hmm. Any development of new products or changes to existing products requires IT resources, for example. Right. And every company says that we're always in shortage of IT resources. Well, so one of the things that you could do is adopt a BRMS system that might be able to bring in business people to the mix. So you now have them take the responsibility of the business logic, in turn requiring less IT resources and not having to wait for them. The other opposite end to that is companies which might come back and say, hey, look, we've got plenty of IT resources, right? So that's really not our worry. But the reason why we've not been able to be more agile is because development is a really long process. It takes months for us to come out with any kind of a product or a product change. And for them, they might be looking at a BRMS system to shorten that development time, because now you can specify and model and test your rules at the same time. So it's not about bringing business folks, it's still about IT, but now you're using the rules engine rather than having to write all of that code.
But I think about the BRMS solution is a place where the business folks and the IT folks kind of come together typically, true?
Absolutely. It's a tool where both business and IT need to collaborate with each other. So it's no longer the case where, hey business, you give us the requirements and send it over the wall to IT and not have any say in how things are happening. With a BRMS system, it depends on how the organization wants to function. If it's the business people are comfortable writing the rules themselves, they still have to work with IT in making sure the application is ready to function with that business logic. In the other sense, you can have IT teams writing rules in a rules engine, but also collaborating with the business people and saying, hey, look, you gave me a set of 5 requirements, you forgot about those 3. What am I supposed to do with those 3? Mm-hmm. So it's always a collaboration between business and IT.
James, this is Connie.
Yes.
Can I make an adjustment? I think
Please.
whenever you have these conversations, it's the business analyst that is that key bridge between IT and the business. And the business analyst may actually sit in IT. They may sit in different parts of the business. They may have a specialized competency center. They could be many different places around an organization. And no matter what technology we're talking about, whether it's business process management or business rules or predictive analytics, or the list goes on and on and on, we're talking about more and more these complex technologies that are now evolving, right, where the business has a lot of control over it, but not just any old business person. It's usually some very well-trained, technically oriented business analyst, and I think that's an important distinction to make.
Well, how does that tie into how a business might select a BRMS solution, Connie? What's your take on that?
Well, I have an opinion about business rules software, that you should be looking for something that's very logical and very straightforward and easy to use. And not all products are like that. Some are so unbelievably complicated, they will literally give you a migraine. And if you're trying to empower the business, you don't want a tool like that. So you want the tool to get the job done, and if it's a complex process like underwriting, you have a lot you're expecting of the tool. But at the end of the day, if business is to be empowered, then they need a business-ready tool that can be understood by technically oriented business people.
An intuitive user interface, in other words.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Ken, what's your take? What would you advise people in terms of selecting a BRMS solution?
Yeah, I would have to agree with Connie in that it needs to be something that's easy for people to use, or it's not going to get the adoption level that you're really looking for in the business. And that's what you really want, is for people to engage and really use the tool to its fullest extent, not just use it as an Excel spreadsheet or something. You really want full engagement. So it's going to have to be something intuitive, easy to use, and something that's a little more not just user friendly, but also business friendly. Mm-hmm. So I think the choice is going to have to come down to something that's business friendly and user friendly.
Dana, what's your take? I know you blog about a lot of topics. If you're going to blog about this, what would you say? Like how to select a BRMS solution?
Yeah, I think the user experience is becoming top of mind for lots of different parts of IT and business, and that, I think, is supported by the need for additional automation across what we're doing with IT. The role of IT is shifting towards a broker specifier, getting out of the weeds of implementation and deployment, And we're seeing that cut across a lot of these other different types of tools and management. So in addition to the user experience, we also want to look at a system that's able to be backwards compatible to existing rules and the data where those rules exist. We want to be forward compatible and recognize that we're doing extended enterprise activities. And so we're going to need to have open APIs and open embrace of standards and the ability to extend our business rules regardless of where the business processes take us. So you want to look for something that's platform agnostic, that's not just in one framework or one tool set, that cuts across the breadth and depth of the new openness that we're looking for across organizations and processes, but also not have to cut bait and start from scratch, something that gives you return on your investment for what you've had in place with your rules engines and business processes all along.
Yeah, the new openness in particular, it's amazed me over the last, like, say, 5 years or so. The idea of interoperability used to be a good idea. Now it's like absolutely like table stakes. You can't even walk up to the table without being really interoperable.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons we're seeing a lot of adoption of open source readily. You know, we're seeing more and more companies say, I'm going to open source this code, or I'm going to make a community development approach available to this. So they realize that the community is a great way to have that adoption of openness and more migration and interoperability, but recognizing that islands are no longer the issue, and you have to be able to extend across islands, whether it's islands of automation, platform, application, interfaces, what have you.
What about key trends shaping BRMS today? Whether it's something involving data analytics, a mobile play, what's shaping things? Anchor, what's your sense of that?
I think both of these are things that are actually shaping the trends for BRMS. From an analytics standpoint, right, there's this big notion about big data and how every company is talking about big data. And what they don't realize is that while big data plays in a market where you have these disparate data sources dynamically looking at data and coming out with trends, there's still a manual process involved where once you've identified these trends and patterns from that data, you're still looking at that trends and trying to figure out what decision should I make next. And I think that's where the BRMS systems come into play as well. Is once you've identified these 100 or 200 odd variables of dynamic data that you've analyzed, feed them into a decision engine that says, okay, based on these patterns and trends, here's the decision that you should be making. I think definitely that decision analytics notion is definitely a big trend. I think mobile is another one. I'm just not sure whether mobile, when is mobile really going to take off from a rules perspective, because most of the enterprises and people that are building mobile apps are not really redefining their business logic. They're building a mobile front end to an already existing business logic that might reside in a mainframe system or any other kind of system, and they're right now all geared towards building a mobile app that focuses on the UI, not really the logic.
So it's processing power, but the data is not resident on the device?
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, James, just a thought on that. Perhaps by combining a rules engine management capability with big data analysis, we'll start to change the way people think about the actual processes rather than just wrapping a user experience from the mobile device on it. You really do need to rethink the way you do work if, in fact, everybody in the field across your organization has access to all the data all the time with ease. So perhaps there is an accelerant when you bring in a comprehensive rules management system to help you better focus on the processes rather than the applications. And then you can take fuller advantage of things like mobile and big data, and IT can bring cloud solutions to bear on how to support those processes best.
When you talk about a rethinking, what do you mean? What is being rethought there?
Yeah, it really, when we look at the combination, what some people call platform 3 of cloud enablement, mobile front ends, and extension of applications and data, of big data, collaboration,
social.
And social is part of that big data in my thinking. But we need to start doing business differently in terms of how work is defined and done and how resources are brought to bear on a problem. And more we're seeing hybrid models where you're going to do certain things with certain applications internally. You're going to be looking to have much deeper integration with partners across your supply chain, for example, or extended enterprise activities. And simply using the same old apps in the same old way doesn't get you the productivity benefits of rethinking how you do business, whether it's feedback loops from analysis that gets injected into decision making on a constant basis, whether it's about how you take advantage of globalization and outsourcing or resourcing back, whether you're thinking about how to take advantage of people on the ground rather than offices, getting people out into the field. So it begs more than just an extension of existing apps and data to a mobile device. You need to rethink how you do things, and a rules engine helps you actually take those steps with a confidence, lower risk, and a sense that you can get complexity without chaos.
I think that's true, and I think you could make an argument, a strong argument, that business rules is a core foundational technology that should be found at the heart of many things. But I also think that for whatever reason, business rules often gets overlooked. So you have conversations about predictive analytics and big data and so forth all the time, and business rules never comes up. I myself live in the business process management world, and we've moved on to adaptive case management, and you hear collaboration and social and analytics and big data and process mentioned. Business rules often goes unmentioned. And I think it may be because there's not a strong, widespread understanding of them. It may be because they've never hit a critical mass in terms of volumes of sales or whatever, but I think that business rules makes all of this decisioning, whether it's a process or analyzing a massive amount of information, it makes all of it better, but people often just forget about it.
I would just add in, I completely agree with you, Connie, on that, and I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One is what you pointed out, lack of awareness, right? Rule engines have existed for about 15 odd years now. There's still so many people that have absolutely no idea that rule engines exist. And when we talk to these guys and we talk to these prospects and we tell them about rules engines, and for some there's immediately like a light bulb moment that goes on and says, wow, my life would have been so much simpler if I knew something like this existed. And I think the second piece of that is from a big process standpoint, when companies are implementing these big process change and big BPM solutions, these are big, daunting systems that take a lot of time out of what the company should actually be focusing on. So implementing a BPM solution, for example, in itself is so complicated that implementing rules engines, which actually enhances the value of BPM, never really crosses their mind.
Don't you think, though, Anchor, that as big data continues to rise, BRMS will rise with it, even though they're different ideas directly, but they will help each other?
Absolutely. Any kind of decision that you think about, right, requires data. You're not making a decision in silos. You're making a decision based on several different amounts of data that you have. And I think as you connect these data sources and you get a lot more information, absolutely, the more data you have, the better it is for a rules engine to look at all of these data points and give you that decision.
Ken, what's your take in terms of like what trends are influencing the BRMS market? What's shaping things out there?
Well, I think Dana brought up some good points when he pointed out globalization and open source and also cross-platform capability. I mean, people need access to their data everywhere and anywhere. And, you know, if they're at a coffee shop or if they're in Mumbai or if they're in London or wherever they are, they need access on whatever device they have with them. So, you know, I think that's a big trend. It's not just mobile, but it's absolute access to your data. So I think that's a major trend that we're going to see in the future, is that people will require access to their data anywhere, everywhere, and on any device.
Mm-hmm. What about things that, actual pitfalls or things to be worried about, concerns, challenges regarding BRMS? What's a major worry? Connie, what's your sense? What would you tell people about that?
Um, I think a major concern I've already raised, which is just extreme complexity. And I realize there are some processes that are just flat out complex because of regulatory requirements, especially in insurance where you have every state with different legalities and so forth. But overcomplicating it will really hurt adoption, slow the projects down, turn them into very costly, expensive things. So I think a good way to
Overcomplicating the user interface, you mean?
the user interface, the everything,
Yeah.
the deployment. Oh, you mean the complexity of the product? I mean the back end and the user interface. And I think one way to do this is to take inventory of the kinds of processes you have and what are their characteristics, and then do a matching process, because it may not be one single business rules engine is the total solution for the entire enterprise. It may be more horses for courses, where a certain kind of process maps to a certain type of product. And I think that that's the kind of thinking I would do in order to save a lot of money and save a lot of time and a lot of aggravation.
It seems like any product that asks IT folks and business folks to work closely together could have some built-in challenges to begin with. Edgar, what's your take on things to be concerned about with BRMS solutions?
Sure. I think there are a couple things. I completely agree from a business IT standpoint that you're talking about user friendliness, right? But I also think that the whole notion of you need to figure out who the intended user actually is. We do talk about business IT collaboration. Oftentimes, what happens is, even though you bought a tool thinking that your business people are going to use it, businesses sort of revolt because they don't want to take on the ownership. They don't want to take on that liability. It's always easier to blame things on IT if things go wrong,
right,
rather than take that ownership, right? So when we're talking about that collaboration, we have to figure out who that intended user is. And from a user friendliness aspect, if there's any chance that you do want your business people to use it, you have to look at a tool which is friendly for the business people. Not just from a UI aspect, but from an aspect that you're not asking the business people to learn any kind of a proprietary language, right? It's so intuitive in the sense that without having to learn any kind of technology, you can start using the tool. The other thing I think was mentioned was one platform agnostic, right? But the whole notion that Connie brought up is from an enterprise standpoint, you need to figure out whether you're looking at a rules engine for a very small project that you have in mind, or you're looking to build like an enterprise-wide decisioning strategy, where as a company you're saying, look, all my business logic is going to reside in rule engines. And the needs for each product might be different. And I think the last piece, I think that is a big risk that I see oftentimes is when you're looking at products, when you're looking at different tools, companies typically tend to give you a very superficial, very simple demo of the product that blows everything out of the water just because they're using very simple rules and they know what the pitfalls of the product are. I would force the customers and the prospects to push back on those demos and say, no, I want a really complex use case with hierarchical data associations, really complex logic, because you never know how complex the product is going to be to use when you're actually in a real live practical scenario.
So in other words, you would ask the salesperson to use variables of the real company they're pitching to?
Absolutely, and that's what we call as a proof of concept.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You go down, you say, well, I need to build a POC, a proof of concept. Here's a sample of my most complex logic that I have in my company. Show me how your product works with that. So it's a big investment, and you don't want to go easy on any software vendor and take their word of mouth, right?
Right.
You want to test them before making that investment. you don't want to be in a position 2 years down the line where you're actually suing a vendor, for example, that your product doesn't work and it's not, I'm out $1 million and I'm still nowhere close to where I was supposed to be.
Right. Dana, what do you think some potential pitfalls or challenges are for a BRMS solution?
Right. I think you want to perhaps be careful that you're dealing with a vendor where the rules engine is very ancillary to their main business, as an afterthought, and is therefore not very well engineered or sophisticated. You want to look for a vendor where the rules engine is a primary product line, is an important part of their overall business and success. And with that, you would probably see a well-engineered, well-thought-out product that is advancing beyond just a standalone repository and becoming more like what we saw with software, where it becomes more object-oriented, modular, where patterns of reuse, where services orientation are brought to bear, and where sophistication and scale are part of the top requirements, so that you can either use it on a project basis or extend it to be an enterprise-wide solution. So you want to look for a well-engineered product from a vendor that looks at this product line as an essential part of its growth and success, and that actually allows for patterns of reuse, modular definition of what a good rules snippet or flow is, and how you can then extend that and reuse it. And that helps on that whole issue about users, business users, becoming more adept at this, rather than starting from scratch every time they want to create a flow. They've got something that's already well developed that they can start from and improve upon.
Mm-hmm.
And James, I think that's a bit of a complication. It just is what it is. But often business rules software is embedded in something bigger. And so then you get into you're picking out the whole, but the parts are very important too. And I think that can just become a complicating factor. You can also buy business rules engines directly and then have someone or yourself integrate them into something bigger. But I'm not sure what percentage of BREs are sold as part of something else, but I bet it's pretty high.
Are you recommending a standalone or not standalone, or that's not the point?
Yeah, that's what I was saying, is that, we've been talking about selecting and matching to your requirements and so forth, but the question becomes, what are you buying and how is it packaged? Because if you perceive that you're buying, I'm sorry, I keep using business process, but that's my bag. If you perceive you're buying a complex, advanced business process management suite, and business rules is actually a very important piece of that suite, but you may not realize it because it's one of many things, what becomes the more important thing? Where do you really drill in and make sure it matches your requirement? I mean, it could be that the whole thing matches your requirement and the business rules engine matches your requirement and everything is great. Or it could be something suboptimal, and what do you suboptimize on, for example? I just think it's a little bit complicated.
I just quickly say I agree with Connie. It is a little bit complicated, and if you really think about it, rule engines, right, or business logic doesn't exist in a silo. It's always part of a process. It's always part of this big stack of IT systems that a company has. And no one really wakes up in the morning saying, hey, I need to buy a rules engine. Yeah. They have a problem and they wake up trying to solve that problem. And one way could be that you buy these separate components and try to work them in, which is where you will look for a standalone rules engine. The other way is you look at either companies or software vendors that have this big solution suite. And in most cases that we've seen, rules engine as a component is just there so that they can tick a checkbox, right? If the question comes in, hey, what do we do about rules? We can say, look, we have something. It might not be as sophisticated. It might not be as user-friendly, but at least we have it. So I think there's two ways. Either you buy these components separately, which are designed for that specific functionality, or you're looking at a complete solution suite where everything is a small component, but not all of those things are the focus for a company.
So it sounds like the complexity of that complete solution suite creates a lot of questions that may be more difficult to answer.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about looking at the future? Say, if we have this conversation, 3 years from now, and what would we be talking about for business rules management software? What does the future hold? Ken, what's your take on that? Where is this going? This sector going?
Well, I think from an architectural point of view, which is something I would be more familiar with, is everything will be SaaS-based. I think that people will want so much access to their data, and like I've said before, on any device and any place. I think that these solutions are going to be cloud-based or SaaS-based, and you'll be able to pick up any device and get access to your data, and the rules that are happening right now in your business. So I think that's going to be the trend. I think the old school way of doing things with an internal system, I guess walled off from the world, is going to go the way of the dinosaur. I think that cloud-based BRMS solutions are going to be the future.
Dana, your sense of the future, looking at a crystal ball, what will we be talking about for BRMS a few years from now?
Yeah, I think the profile and importance of rules and rules management and process management are going to get significantly greater and higher in people's thinking, become more top of mind. And that's because when you do finally evolve towards some sort of a hybrid cloud with a lot of SaaS and PaaS mixed in environment, what defines your company? What defines your company is the relationships between those assets and resources, and the way that you manage a relationship between a supplier or a partner. And those rules need to be really well managed, defined, and reused, and extensible and protected. We didn't talk too much about risk and compliance issues. So as the benefits and productivity of things like cloud grow and we adopt them, where the resources reside and how they're supported on what hardware, software, platform, or framework is less relevant, but the relationships become more important. And what defines my organization as a company is the rules that bind me to processes, to work, to assets, resources, groups of people, and other enterprises themselves. Therefore, this is becoming, I think, a much more important and essential part of any enterprise is good process, rules, management, and definition, extensibility, capability, and skills.
Connie, your sense of the future of BRMS, where is this going?
Yeah, I'd like to follow on to that and talk about a really, I think, significant development, which is, in fact, we've alluded to it, sort of the next generation development platform. And there's a whole body of thought that I agree with, that the whole boundary of business process management has gotten so squishy, it's spilled over into other areas. So you have the combination of a business process management suite with a business rules engine that also has analytics and collaboration and social and document management and output management, and you can kind of go on with this list. And what is happening now are vendors that make these platforms. Oh, there goes my dog. I'm sorry. These next
is he a BRMS expert, by the way?
Yeah, he's an expert on food.
Okay, good.
But these vendors that have these platforms, these expanded platforms, they are now building out-of-the-box apps, and they are having their partner channel build out-of-the-box apps, and they can be cross-industry, they can be industry-specific. And so what I see is just this plethora of new apps that are going to come out that have business rules in them and are going to have a business process in them and analytics in them. And one of the key elements of these new out-of-the-box apps, and I'm not talking about mobile apps, I mean applications,
right,
is change, support for changing your rules, support for changing your processes, support for changing the data that you're monitoring coming from big data. And I think this is going to be an explosion. There are going to be so many new applications, and they're all going to be based upon a much more flexible, adaptable platform. I think it'll be exciting times.
Interesting. Anchor, your sense of the future of BRMS? Where is this going?
Right. I think I agree a lot with what the experts have said. I think cloud is definitely a big play. Over the next several years, I think people will try to figure out what going to the cloud would really mean, whether it's as a service play or just hosted in a cloud or a private cloud environment. But I think also, if you look at the way rule engines exist today, right? We talk about either rule engines are a good fit if you've got constantly changing rules, and either they're large or they're overly complex. And I think as we go on, as this rule engines, as customers become more aware of rule engines, there would be a big push towards simplifying the UI, not from a business IT perspective, but from an extent where, what about those customers where the rules aren't constantly changing? What happens with those customers where the rules aren't overly complex, but they still want to be able to use a rules engine with a relatively simpler UI? I think that would be a really critical play as well. And I think last piece would be just figuring out this big data piece. I think once all these data sources get connected, I was in a region a couple of weeks ago where one of the biggest problems they said was our data sources are not connected. So rules engine, we can't even think of using a rules engine because today we need data from 10 different data sources. So we have to print out reports and individually look at those 10 different reports. There's no way that data is getting connected. And I think once that begins to happen, you'll see a lot more adoption of these rules coming into play and decisions being automated.
Yeah, that middle point there, if I'm understanding you correctly, you talked about simpler applications for a business that has simpler needs.
Right.
Is that you're talking about a different application altogether, or one application that can scale up in simplicity or complexity?
Either one. I think it doesn't really matter. What I was trying to say was rules shouldn't be thought of as overly complex and either a large volume or constantly changing rules, right? If you have rules that aren't constantly changing every 3 months or 6 months, right? Maybe they're changing on an annual basis. Anytime you're building a new application, you should be thinking about, well, where's my logic going to reside? Should it reside in the form of a code, or should it reside in the form of a rules engine? And when you start building out those applications which have a relatively simpler logic, you would still be able to use those rules engines because over the next several years, they've been so much simplified for those use cases.
Makes sense. All right. Well, that's a lot of good stuff. I think someone learned something along the way. I know I did. I appreciate the four of you's expertise, and I'll send you a link. We can all tweet it. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.